And so the conquest continues. Cortez and the Spanish now had thousands of allies, thousands of native allies to help them with their eventual conquest of Tenochtitlan. The most allies came from the city of Tlaxcala. And after making these allies, Cortez, the Spanish, the Tlaxcalans, and other indigenous soldiers moved on to the west towards Tenochtitlan. And the next major stop was Cholula. And something quite important happened at Cholula. Um, it's termed sometimes the Battle of Cholula, but more commonly the Massacre at Cholula. And there's two versions of how this happened here, this massacre. The first says that Cortez and the Spanish heard through Malencine, his translator, that there was a plot waiting to be carried out against the Spanish. Essentially, that the Cholulans were going to attack the Spanish at night and massacre them. And as this story goes, Cortez heard about this plot, and he and the Spanish preempted it by attacking the Cholulans and killing hundreds and hundreds of them. The second version has the same outcome, actually, but it begins with Cortez wanting to send a message to Montezuma. The Spanish were drawing closer to the city of Tenochtitlan, and Cortez knew that Montezuma had agents or spies kind of going throughout the countryside. And Cortez knew that some of these agents were in Cholula. So, this version, the indigenous version actually, that can be found in the Florentine Codex, says that Cortez wanted to send a message to Montezuma. And so, considering that, he massacred the people of the city. He massacred the Cholulans. There's a great deal of artwork, both on the European and the indigenous side, that deals with this. Either way, no matter how it started, no matter what Cortez's real intention, motivation was, he did send a message. And Montezuma would have heard of this. He would have heard of the massacre at Cholula. And so this essentially gave him something to be very concerned with. So eventually, on November 8th, 1519, which is about 6 months after they departed Cuba, Cortez, the Spanish, and their thousands of indigenous allies arrive in Tenochtitlan, the Mexica capital, the center of the Aztec Empire. And their arrival, well, you could consider it in many ways to be the meeting of two worlds. On one hand, you had Cortez and the Spanish, ambassadors of the King of Spain, if you will, and on the other, you had Montezuma, the king of an immense empire that ruled over millions of people in central Mexico. Um, there's different versions of their first meeting. There's the Spanish side, told by Cortez, told by Bernal Diaz, and there's the indigenous side that can be found in the Florentine Codex. Both of these accounts highlight the fact that this was a critical meeting. Um, in either way, Montezuma seems to have been very cautious in this meeting. If anything, he perhaps overestimated the power of the Spanish. We don't know. That's the problem here. He left no journal. There's no record of exactly how he felt about the Spanish, how he exactly was judging them. But one thing is for sure, Montezuma had been elected. He was not someone who just inherited his throne because of who he was, because of who his father was. He was an accomplished statesman, an accomplished politician, an accomplished warrior. So clearly he saw something in the Spanish. He saw a reason why they shouldn't perhaps simply attack them, why the thousands of people, thousands of Mexicans in the army of Tenochtitlan, why they should not simply uh, all turn on the Spanish at once. We don't know. It's an interesting question to ask. What would have happened? Certainly the Spanish had allies, but they and their allies were far outnumbered by the Mexica army. So, in any event, the Spanish, after this meeting, went on to kind of live in the city. They explored it much like tourists would explore a city today. They went to fine dinners. They went to Montezuma's aviary. They were very impressed with that. And they went to religious ceremonies where they actually did see sacrifices. And in every case, they were quite horrified at what they saw regarding human sacrifice. After spending several months in the city, Cortez heard news from the coast, news from Veracruz, that Diego Velazquez, the governor of Cuba, had finally kind of acted on his threats. He had sent someone to arrest Cortez. Remember, Cortez had left Cuba basically illegally, without the permission of the governor, and so he probably figured this was going to happen. So Diego Velazquez sent Panfilo Narvaez with an army of over 1,000 men to arrest Cortez. And Narvaez is essentially a bounty hunter. He is looking to take Cortez back to Cuba, arrest him. So Cortez had to leave Tenochtitlan. But before he left, he wanted to make sure that things didn't get out of control, that no rebellion was started against the Spanish. And so he took a very kind of brash action. He had Montezuma essentially arrested, put on house arrest. And remember, this is the king of one of the most powerful empires in the world at this time. And essentially, Cortez acted very, very boldly here by locking him down, essentially, in his royal apartments. He left him under the care and under the control of Pedro de Alvarado, his second in command, and Cortez and several dozen Spanish rode for the coast. They rode for Veracruz to go confront Panfilo de Narvaez. And when they got there, they found Narvaez and his 1,000 Spanish soldiers ready to fight. The thing was, Cortez also arrived with thousands of indigenous allies. These allies were already proving themselves extremely valuable, not only in their conflict against the indigenous people, but also now in Cortez's conflict with the Spanish authorities. And so, after a short battle in which several Spaniards died on either side, Cortez was able to convince Narvaez's men to join him, to join his cause. And so this encounter, it was key for several reasons. One, Cortez got reinforcements. He got 1,000 more men. He got 80 or so horses. He got guns, crossbows. He really added to his forces. Secondly, this voyage, the Narvaez voyage, actually brought smallpox to Mexico for the first time. An enslaved African who was with Narvaez, he had smallpox, and he brought the disease to Mexico. This would play a crucial role in the eventual siege and the final battles of Tenochtitlan. Smallpox would ravage the population just as they were working to defend themselves against the Spanish. And finally, this example with Narvaez, it shows that the conquest of Mexico was not this very simple, streamlined affair. There was ups and downs. In fact, Cortez was not really always in total control of the whole situation, you might say. He had to step away to deal with this very serious threat to his authority. Yes, he was able to spin it into something hugely advantageous for himself by gaining these reinforcements. But really, this shows that this was a long, complicated process, with it not just being simply Spanish versus indigenous. At times, Spanish were allied with indigenous. Very often, in fact, they were. And at other times, Spanish fought against other Spanish. In this case, Cortez and his indigenous allies fought against other Spanish soldiers. And so Cortez left this encounter with Narvaez far more powerful than he was when he had left the city of Tenochtitlan. However, he arrived back to Tenochtitlan to find that Alvarado had acted a bit, perhaps out of hand, and really created some problems for the Spanish.